Hi everybody, and in this video we are going to be talking about the basic care of Horsfield / Russian tortoises. So please sit back, relax and enjoy the content. Towards the end of the video, this is where we are going to discuss hibernation and how to start the hibernation process. So as always, let's discuss where these guys come from. So where are these tortoises endemic to? So for those of you that call them Russian tortoises, yes, they come from parts of Russia, but you can also find them in places such as Afghanistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Iran, parts of China, the Islamic Republic of Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. So these guys will inhabit quite a wide variety of different countries. They're quite widespread. So let's jump right into enclosure size and what kind of enclosure we're going to keep them in. So for like a baby Horsfield tortoise, the bare minimum we would recommend would be 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. However, unlike most reptiles, we do not recommend that these guys go into a vivarium. What we would typically recommend for tortoises, most like Mediterranean, European species, Central Asian, that kind of thing, we would recommend like an open top table. So, why do we recommend tables for tortoises as opposed to vivariums? Well, there are two really simple reasons why. So, reason number one is ventilation. So, tortoises do a lot better with a lot of ventilation, of which you cannot get enough for what the tortoise needs inside a vivarium. And the second is your thermal gradient. So tortoises need a relatively large thermal gradient. So you're talking like basking spots of like 30 odd degrees and then like it fairly cool in the other end of the enclosure. Something of which you realistically can't get in a vivarium. So you can keep the tortoise inside the tortoise table for like the rest of its life, but not in a 4 foot by 2 foot. We would recommend something a lot larger than that. So for a Horsfield tortoise, we would say the minimum size tortoise table to pop them in would be something in the regions of like 10 to 12 foot by like 2, 3, 4 foot deep. So they're not as sedentary as what people think they are. They're actually quite active. They're very, very, very active animals and like to explore. So definitely pop all sorts of bits and bobs inside the enclosure as well. However, as the tortoise gets larger, if you want to, which is something we would definitely recommend, is do an outdoor enclosure for your tortoise. Now, I'm going to do a separate video, I think, on the different like outdoor enclosures and whatnot, so stick around for that one. But in this video, we're just going to talk about tortoise tables and how to take care of your little, like, well, basically your baby tortoise. So what heating parameters am I going to need for my Horsfield tortoise? So your basking spot would preferably be around about 30, 32, 35 degrees. Anywhere there is absolutely fine. Where your cooler end, we typically recommend it around about 18 to like 20, 24 degrees or so. So being like a European / Eurasian species, these guys can be cooled down quite considerable at night time. So if you want to, a safe bracket to pop them in would be around about 12 degrees to about 18 degrees. Now, when it comes to humidity, it's going to be quite difficult to get like a average humidity inside something that is essentially open top. So what we would recommend you do is pop humid refuges in there. So this can be done by like really wetting like cocoa fibers or sphagnum moss, any like moisture absorbing substance that's safe to use with your reptile. So we've spoken about like what temperature it needs to be. So how are we going to heat this enclosure up? So we would always recommend using light emitting heat sources. So things that emit infrared A and B. So we would not recommend using things like heat mats, ceramic lamps, or in fact kind of like heat cable. I've seen that before, which was quite odd. Tortoises, like most reptiles, can't really utilize infrared C. So tortoises definitely can't utilize infrared C due to their like really thick keratin rich shell. So what we need to do is we need to provide them bulbs that emit infrared A and B. Now this is going to penetrate deep inside your tortoise and warm your tortoise from the inside out, rather than with like a ceramic bulb from the outside in. On a nighttime as well, we would recommend turn everything off. So if you are in the process of getting a tortoise, or you already have your tortoise and you've been sold a like ceramic heat lamp, or the pet shop that you're getting it from recommends a ceramic heat lamp, just don't listen to them. They do not know what they are talking about. So in terms of like how we're going to control the heat, we would typically recommend using a dimming thermostat. So just pop the dimming thermostat onto your basking spot bulb of choice, and then place the probe inside the enclosure, and then just have like a general play about with it until you get the ideal temperature. Now, a lot of people get thermostats and thermometers mixed up. So thermostats are going to control the temperature inside the enclosure, and your thermometers are going to tell you the temperature inside your enclosure. So I know some thermostats will also tell you the temperature, but they're like the really like high-tech ones and stuff like that. But we're just gonna do it as kind of like a basic starter in this video. So a super commonly asked question we get here is about UVB. So most people are aware that tortoises need UVB, like all reptiles do. Now, what is the best tortoise light, or the best UVB for my tortoise? So we would always recommend using a linear T5 bulb with an additional basking spot bulb. Now, there are things on the market called mercury vapor bulbs. These are okay. These will work in a pinch, or if you have like a small tortoise, it's okay. But preferably, we would recommend using the linear T5. So most kits will come with mercury vapor bulbs. I know the ones that we sell here, they come with mercury vapor bulbs, but we always tell our customers that eventually we definitely would recommend you do upgrade. So are mercury vapor bulbs, or MVBs, are they any good? Yeah. They're okay. They're not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Unlike like the curly whirly bulbs, we definitely wouldn't really recommend using those for tortoises. Mercury vapor bulbs are by far better than the curly whirlies, but the linear T5 lighting is by far better than your mercury vapor bulb. So what is the activity period of a Horsfield tortoise? So these guys are in fact diurnal. So they're going to be awake when you're awake and asleep when you're asleep. So therefore, we would always recommend having a photo period of around about 12 hours on and 12 hours off. I mean, realistically, you could mimic the photo period that we have here if you wanted to. So as the nights are drawing and getting a little bit darker, you can replicate that if you want to. So all heat sources and light sources should be off on a night time. So that's 12 hours on, 12 hours off for absolutely everything, your heating and lighting. Now, what substrate is best to use with my tortoise? So again, this is a bit of a weird one. So in the wild, these guys will typically be on like soily kind of substrates, hard compacted clays, that kind of thing. So when we see like straw bedding or like hemp beddings, that type of thing, personally, I just think it's a little bit weird. Especially like the hemp beddings and stuff, extremely bizarre. But we would always recommend using like topsoils, sandy soily mixtures, that kind of thing. But a lot of people do still sell and still use like the round compressed like grass pellets and stuff. They're really not good like for your tortoise, like at all. So especially as the tortoise gets older. Now, the reason why they are not the best for your tortoise is because it prohibits the tortoise from developing really key muscle and muscle definition within the legs. So when it gets older, it's going to find it very difficult to like basically try and walk. So the shell itself is quite heavy, so the tortoise needs to have a really strong set of legs so it can carry that shell around with it. So yeah, so in terms of substrates, just stick to like topsoils or sandy soily mixtures, preferably more soily, and you'll be absolutely fine. You can literally get topsoil, like multi-purpose topsoil, from like most like good like garden centres. So like here in the UK, you can get it from things like Pennells, get them from B&Q, Wix, any of those companies. I think in America, so I have spoken to my American friends, you can get them from Lowe's. I think that's what it's called, but any department store. No, that's not right, is it? I don't know what you call it over there. So you've got your sandy soily mixture or just like topsoily mixture. So how thick does this need to be? So we see quite often that people will get it and they'll just put like a really thin layer of substrate at the bottom of the enclosure. It just looks quite sad. What we would say to do is have a really nice thick layer of substrate. So as a minimum, have it like just above like the shell. So from the highest point of the shell, have it at that thickness as a minimum. If you want to go deeper, definitely go deeper. So this is really good like behavioral enrichment for them. So they're going to express natural behaviors, which is like a positive. Also, it's really good for them to like experience like different humid microclimates. So if you've like forgotten like to like wet the soil down or like spray it, anything like that, the tortoise then has the ability to go down into the substrate and seek more humid climes. Now, my favorite bit is the decorations. So how are we going to like set this enclosure up? So as always, as long as whatever you decide to pop in there is safe to use with the animal, then it'll be absolutely fine. As long as the animal can interact with it in like a safe, novel way, then you'll be absolutely fine. But as always, I am a natural bug. I prefer my enclosures to look as natural as possible. So I will use like rocks, branches, logs, sticks, leaf litter. I have found out that tortoises, the ones we have here, absolutely love leaf litter. You can find them if you ever pop into the store. You find them like burying around, like kicking the leaf litter up, that kind of thing. So you can definitely add leaf litter in there as an extra form of enrichment. So a lot of people tend to like panic, like, oh my God, like what if it flips up on his back? Is he going to die? It'll literally be fine. Like if the animal's been there for quite a while, just like flip him back up, but like don't helicopter parent your tortoise. Just let it be a tortoise. Let it do tortoise things. If it flips up on his back, he will she will eventually go and flip and make himself right again. If, however, your tortoise is suffering from like pyramiding and it might be a little bit difficult to like try and flip up, aid the tortoise. But in terms of enrichment, it's really, really good practice. As well as your substrate being quite thick, we would also like recommend popping like hides in there and stuff. So if just in case the tortoise didn't really want to like go and burrow, it can go and take itself off somewhere where it doesn't have to look at your face. I've noticed this quite a lot with our tortoises. They will do that. If they're just like sick of seeing you, they're gonna be like, oh, well, I'm done with you now. I've had my food. I'm off in here now. Cheers, kid. See you later. So offer them multiple hides as well. So you can offer them a dry hide or you can offer them a humid hide. So the animal's got the choice. If it wants to find somewhere that's a little bit more humid, so it can like cool down, thermoregulate, that kind of thing, it can do. If it wants to somewhere a little bit dry, it also has the option to do so. Now, moving on to a particularly spicy kind of topic is in fact diet. So what should you feed your tortoise? So in the wild, their diets are extremely bland and very boring. But their bodies have evolved to deal with this. So what we would recommend you do, you should really primarily feed them more like a weed-based diet. So things like plantains, alfalfas, lemon balms, dandelions. If you are in a pinch and it gets to wintertime and you haven't, for example, like hibernated your tortoise, you can give them like shot bought stuff. So lamb's lettuce is okay, but we wouldn't really recommend feeding them this like constantly. So even though it's quite low in calories for us, it's quite high for them. So the salads and stuff that we like breed within the captive environment are essentially genetically modified. They are modified to be more calorific. So just bear that in mind. So another one we get is fruit. We would say, well, I definitely would say, fruit is just a flat no. Now, if you feed your tortoise fruit, it's not going to kill it by any stretch of the imagination. So if you wanted to give them fruit, I suppose I'll relent. I suppose you could give them fruit once every like couple of months or so. Maybe like a blueberry or a little bit of a strawberry, bit of watermelon, that kind of thing. I mean, I just don't feed my tortoises it like whatsoever. They wouldn't really eat fruit in the wild. Try and base the diet on the wild the best we possibly can. So another thing that's a little bit frustrating is quite a lot of the commercial diets that we see for tortoises are really bad. Like, they're filled with absolutely nothing. It's a lot cheaper to go out and try and find weeds and stuff like that. There are some pretty good like tortoise diets out there, but those are very few and far between. So what I would say is just check with your exotic vet. Check online on like the tortoise forums and groups, because to be fair, the tortoise forums and groups are actually pretty good. I would say they are the least toxic out of all of the reptile forums and groups out there from my dealings with them. Right then, so stay with me here. So we're going to discuss hibernation. Now, hibernation can be quite a scary time for new prospective tortoise owners. So you've just got your tortoise. It's fast approaching like September, like end of August, September time, where you should really start to think about the hibernation process in general. What do you do? What should you do? Now, I would always say it's about your confidence level. If you're confident that you can do it, perfect. If you're not so confident and you're a little bit of a worrier, maybe ease off a little bit. But we'll pop a pin in that one, and we'll return to that potentially later on in this video. So the hibernation process, so the starting of it, will typically start at the end of August through to the start of September. Now, before we even contemplate hibernating the tortoise or anything like that, there are a few steps what we need to do beforehand. So like pre-hibernation checks. So first of all, we need to make sure that the animal has gained enough weight. So it's going to sustain it throughout its dormancy period. So with the fat, it's really good for energy storage, and it's also really good for water storage. If your tortoise is an outside tortoise, or you do take your tortoise outside, we would probably say once you start the process, don't take your tortoise outside. So once you've checked the weight, we would recommend that you send a fecal sample off to your nearest lab. So while the fecal sample has been sent off, so typically what happens, you'll apply for it online, they'll send it in the post. You get like a little poop scoop and a little vial, and you pop the poop in there, twist the cap on, send it off, Bob's your uncle. While that's going on, what we would recommend that you do is start your physical health checks on your animal. So you can either do these health checks yourself, you can either take it to a tortoise specialist who can do these checks for you, or you can take it to a exotic vet. But what you need to do is weigh the animal first, make sure that it's healthy enough to actually go into hibernation. Then check the eyes. So we're going to be checking the eyes for any like swellings, inflammations, that type of thing. Has it got anything stuck in its eyes? Are the eyes weeping? And then once we've checked the eyes and we're all happy with the eyes, we'll then move on to the nose. So nose is quite easy. So you can listen to it. If you're hearing like kind of like a wheezy or like a rasping kind of sound, that would potentially be a cause for concern, and we would recommend seeking veterinary assistance straight away. Also, any streaming, so if there's any discharge or anything like that, then again, take it to a vet. If that's all clean and clear, then move on to the mouth. So a common problem for tortoises, things like stomitis, so like mouth rot. So we're going to be checking, making sure that it's nice and clear, nice and pink, there's no excess saliva in there. And then we'll finish up and check the ears. So do the ears look nice? Obviously, they're not external like our ears or anything like that, but where the ears would be, if they were, is there any kind of like inflammation? Is it raised? And then once we've checked all these kind of areas, would then typically move on to like the shell. So let's check the plastron. So that's the bit underneath. So the underneath of the tortoise is called a plastron. So if it feels like quite hard, then it's fine. If it feels a bit squishy, then that again would potentially be a cause for concern, and go to the vet. Same with the carapace. The carapace, like the bit on top, it needs to be quite sturdy. Once we've checked that, we'll then check the limbs. So can the tortoise move the limbs appropriately? Has it got good gait? Has it got good locomotion? And then finally, moving on to the cloaca and the tail. Now, tortoises can be quite messy and quite dirty. So feces can sometimes be spread like or look like the tail, and they can sometimes have a dirty cloaca. But what we would say just before, just make sure you give it a good clean, so you'd be able to actually see. So again, are there any kind of like lumps, bumps, any inflammation? Is the cloaca, once you've cleaned it, is there any like discharge around there? Does it like smell really bad? So like smells are a really good indication of like parasites, anything not quite right going on in there. So if it does smell really, really bad and not like a standard like tortoise poop, then again, take it straight to a vet. So that's what we would recommend that you do before you even start the hibernation process. So you've now got your test back. So after you've done your health checks, you've got your test back. What does the test say? So it is quite normal for tortoises and like other reptiles, and even us to be fair, to have like a low parasite burden. So our bodies can like move with it. It's fine. We can live with it. Don't worry about it. However, if the tortoise has a high parasite burden or even a medium parasite burden, then we would recommend taking it to a vet, show the vet like what like the piece of paper says, like, or like it says either medium or high parasite burden, and then the vet will be able to prescribe you some medication. So during this time, just again, keep the tortoise inside. Once the animal has in fact finished its course of medication, you can then start the process again. So as annoying as it is, go through your health checks again, send your fecal sample off. It should hopefully by then come back that it's all clear, and then you can start looking into the actual hibernation process. So your tortoise has now been given the all clear. It's absolutely fine from its health check. It's fine from like the parasitology test. Its weight is absolutely fine. So let's get into actually hibernating the tortoise. So the first steps, what we would say to do would be to reduce the photo period. So reduce the amount of time that the animal has access to your heating and lighting. So once this has taken place, it should be around about the 2-week mark, you'll naturally start to see that your tortoise is slowing down. Could become quite lethargic, quite sleeping a lot. This means that the tortoise is going to be fairly ready fairly soon to go into hibernation. Now, don't pop it into hibernation once it starts this. What you need to do once you start to see that it's like sleeping a lot, from the point of the tortoise's last meal, wait around about 3 to 4 weeks, just to make sure that the tortoise has completely evacuated its bowels. So again, just going back a little bit, reduce the amount of food alongside you reducing the amount of light and heat it has. So instead of feeding it every single day, you could do every other day and then move to every other day and then move to every other day until you have fed your tortoise its last meal. Around about this time, you want to be keeping the temperatures quite low, so anywhere from 13 to 15 degrees. So this temperature is going to still allow the tortoise to digest the food that is in there. We would not recommend popping your tortoise into hibernation when it has a full stomach. So we're nearly there. So we've had our last feed, the tortoise has had its last poop. We're super ready now to pop our tortoise into hibernation. Now, there are lots of different methods of hibernation out there. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to discuss the one that I personally and we here at the shop feel is the best and in fact the safest method of hibernation, and that is putting them in the fridge. Now, I can see your faces right now. You've probably looked like, I know it's weird. I know it's extremely weird about putting an animal in the fridge, but we feel it is the safest and the easiest method to do so. So don't pop it obviously inside the fridge that you use for yourself, like next to your milk and eggs or like your meat or whatever's in your fridge. That'd be a little bit weird. What we would say is to get something like a wine cooler, or like a mini fridge. So the temperature we would recommend to set this at would be anywhere from 1 degree to 10 degrees. If your tortoise is quite small, then we typically recommend more on like the 8, 9, 10 degree. If your tortoise is quite large, you can cool them down pretty cool. So if you've got like a 90 odd year old tortoise, 1 degree should be absolutely fine. So your fridge should be placed in the house. So somewhere where it's not going to get below freezing. So an outhouse or a garage or a shed, it can still get quite cold out there. And that then can affect the tortoise inside the fridge. So what container are we going to pop the tortoise in to then pop it into the fridge? So we would always say have like a towel in it. So I pop a towel in like a clear plastic kind of like tub. So at least you can see one side of it. So imagine like this is like the tub. So you've got the sides there and obviously the sides there. Pop the towel over there so the tortoise can sit on the towel, but you can still see it from this way. So once you pop it in there, you've still got like visual access to the tortoise. Another thing that we would also recommend is getting some like digital thermometers, preferably multiple, and popping them inside the fridge just so you can get an accurate reading. So sometimes fridges can malfunction, so it's always best to double check and just make sure what temperature it is in there. Now, once your tortoise is in the fridge, again, very bizarre concept, what we would recommend you do is every like 48 hours or so, just open the fridge, let some fresh air in, just so the air's circulating in there. And then once a week or once every 2 weeks, depending on how confident you are, take the tortoise out and weigh it. So weigh the tortoise before you pop it into hibernation, and then weigh it each week it is in hibernation for. This way, you'll have a accurate diary of, is this animal losing any weight? If your animal is losing weight, then you can stop the hibernation process at any point. Again, this is why we recommend using the fridge method, because it's a lot safer and you're a lot quicker to act if there is a problem. So that is it. So that is your hibernation process all done and dusted, and I hope I've explained it quite well enough for you. So tortoises will hibernate anywhere from around about 2 to 3 months or so. If you're quite new to it, then you can try it for a month, and then the next year you can try it for a month and a half, and then the following year, 2 months, so on and so on. So once you are happy and your tortoise is hibernated for the amount of time that you want it to hibernate for, what we would then recommend you do is the careful process of warming the tortoise up. Now, we wouldn't recommend just taking the animal from like a 9-degree environment and then whacking it under the basking spot bulb where it's like 30, 35 degrees. What we would say is just warm it up gradually. So in a sense, defrost it. So defrost the tortoise. That's what I like to call it. So start off with a bulb that's kind of like 18 degrees, and then the next couple of days move it up to maybe about 20, 22 degrees, and so on and so on. Just gradually warm it up. Also, once you've gradually warmed it up, you should start to see the tortoise is a little bit more active and has got its appetite back. Now, if you are keeping a tortoise outside, then we would recommend for the winter periods in the UK that you have it inside for a little bit longer, and then once it starts to warm up again, you can then pop the tortoise outside. So that was it. That was hibernation from the first process all the way through to taking the tortoise out and warming it up again. So now we've got that out of the way, let's talk about behavior. So Horsfield tortoises, I find, are absolute little characters. So especially males. Males, when it comes to like the breeding season, or if they get that, you know, that nudge, nudge, wink, wink look in their eye, they are absolutely hilarious. So don't leave any shoes lying around, because you'll find a little tortoise surprise in there potentially, because you might think it's a lady tortoise. They can sometimes get aggressive, like with their owners as well, kind of like butting, that kind of thing. But it's quite comical. Like, realistically, what damage can your tortoise do? So in general as well, tortoises don't really like to be held. They are more of a pet that you just kind of look after, don't really touch, do its own thing. So there are lots of things out there in terms of like bathing. So can I bath my tortoise? Like, yeah, sure, go for it. I mean, it doesn't unless there's a medical issue. So if it's got like impaction or anything like that, bathing can help. But other than that, it doesn't really matter. I don't really bathe my tortoises. If you want to have like a bond with the tortoise, then sure. It's a little bit of folklore husbandry that they used to be able to take water up their cloaca, that kind of thing. But they can't. So it's It's just a bit odd, really. And that about does it for this video. So thank you very much for sticking right through to the end. So I know typically this is a little bit of a longer video, but thank you very much. If you have enjoyed the content, please make sure that you give us a like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next one. Ciao for now, my lovelies.